We've got a huge main event here in Las Vegas. I know you're going to be out there. B.J. Penn and George St. Pierre. I know George was training early in the week, working out a little bit here with Greg Jackson at the gym. What's your take on this fight? Because I'm starting to feel. Initially, I thought the fighters a lot of them were on the side of GSP, and I'm hearing more and more B.J. Penn support.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a mixed bag. This is one of those fights where you could flip a coin, and either side could be right. So it's going to be a war. There's no doubt about that. I can only give my opinion, and I think that George is going to win this fight. I think it's going to be a long fight. I don't think it's going to happen early. I think BJ is going to be very effective and very dangerous early, but I think he still has the same Achilles heel that he's had for a long time, and especially at a bigger weight class, is that his conditioning is going to be able to keep the pace that George is going to set for 5 rounds. And ultimately, that will be his undoing. I think he's as talented, as skilled as anything else, but then it comes down to conditioning and who can keep that intensity and that pace, and I think that's George, and he's proven that.
So is the conditioning something he can't overcome, or
is it basically he could go out and wreck him in the first 2 rounds, right, and end the fight, and he has that capability. Yeah. So that, but if George weathers that storm early on, doesn't get damaged too much. I mean, we saw it in the first time they fought. He got the hell beat out of him in the first round, and then it's like BJ hit the wall, and he couldn't sustain that same kind of onslaught for the next 2 rounds, and George won those rounds. So I think a similar thing is going to happen here. Maybe he'll get through 2 rounds of beating George up if he can catch George, but I think ultimately he won't finish George, and in the last 3 rounds, George is going to make up the ground.
The one thing to touch on, though, if he is losing early on, is there still an element, still a part of George St. Pierre that can snap? Is there still a little breaking point with George? Because George is interesting because he is. You can tell he's on that level. He's on your level. He's on the Fedor, the B.J. Penn, the Anderson Silva level, where you're around guys. They're winners. They have a steely confidence about them. But every once in a while, George will say something where you're like, I can't tell if it's the French Canadian part where going to English, where he'll say stuff like, I was really nervous. I was really freaking out. And American fighters don't say that. Now, George may be just brutally honest and not know what he's saying, or is there a small part of the mental side that still George is working on?
Well, certainly since the letdown with the Sarah fight, we haven't seen any mental chinks in that armor at all. He's been on a tear and looked fantastic. And not only at the level that he was at before we saw that, but he's taken that a couple of notches up from there in his confidence in how he's fighting and competing against tough opponents. So, everybody has a breaking point. Is B.J. Penn able to get him there early enough and sustain the gas to keep that pressure on him and get him to that breaking point? I mean, everybody has one.
Have you ever felt it in the cage where you're like, man, I don't know if I can go on any longer?
The first time I fought Pedro Hizzo, I was there at the end of the second round.
Just getting kicked so much?
Punching myself out in the first round and then having to find a way to come back out and get my ass kicked basically in the second round.
Yeah.
I was sitting on that stool between the second and third round and looking at Dan Henderson, and he's looking at me, and he's like, what are you looking at me for?
Yeah.
It's time to go. And I had to make a decision right then whether I was going to stand up and finish that fight, dig deep and find a way to go, or throw in the towel.
While we're on that, let's get one quick comment on this. We talked a lot about this around the boxing event with De La Hoya not going to his boxing fight, going to Affliction. The side story that developed from that was he was afraid to be booed by the Mexican-American fans, and the thought is that fan base has dropped off with De La Hoya because they feel like he was less than a man by quitting on the stool against Pacquiao. What's your reaction as a fighter when you hear fans say that the honorable thing to go out is to go out and get finished, to go out and get knocked out, rather than, what, I hit the wall, I can't do it anymore?
Yeah, I don't know about all that, and I can't speak for the Hispanic crowd. He's had tremendous support from them forever. So I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of all that, but I think his corner and himself, rightly so, evaluated where he was at in the fight and what was going on, and he was just going to get up and sustain more damage, potentially harmful damage. And I think that's a huge difference between MMA and boxing. In the way the rules of engagement are different that allow for a particular kind of damage.
And you'll never hear an MMA fan go, you know what, you should have had your arm broken, you should have been put to sleep.
Yeah, guys tap out.
Yep.
It's, in essence, what he did in the boxing ring was the boxing version of tapping out. And I don't think there's any dishonor in that. I think he knew where he was at. He adequately judged the chances of him finding a way in what was left of the fight to win, and threw in the towel.
All right, the rest of this card, it's funny. I was asking you before we came on, hey, what's intriguing? What's the fight that you want to talk about? And you almost looked at me like, well, there's two unbeaten guys going at it, and one of them might get a shot at the 205 title. So how about we talk about that?
Yeah, well,
Machida and Silva.
Silva and Machida. I had a friend text me today. Who you got? You got the jiu-jitsu guy or Hong Kong Fooey? I was like, I got Hong Kong Fooey because I don't think anybody's figured out how to fight him yet.
Yeah.
I mean, every single guy he fights, he has such an odd style, the angles, and he's elusive. He's hard to get his hands, and I don't think Silva's gonna, his Thai skills are fantastic, but I don't think that he's going to be able to put a hand on him or hurt him any more than anybody else has. Certainly, no more than Tito or any.
Right.
Everybody's had trouble with this guy.
Well, wouldn't you think the basic strategy is you got to get to him, and you got to cut the distance down. You can't let him run around the ring, so it's got to be a takedown guy.
Man,
I think Silva can do it, but I mean he's going to have to take some blows coming in, and is he going to be dogged enough to keep doing it?
Well, he's not a takedown guy.
No.
He's a kicking, kneeing, elbowing, punching guy. So styles make fights, and I think that's a tough style to fight a guy like Machida, who's elusive and hard to get a handle on. A guy like Luder or Henderson is a guy that's going to get their hands on him and put him on the ground, smother him, grind him out. That's the type of guy that'll give Machida a problem.
Yeah. And then interesting, if he wins, he may challenge for the light heavyweight title against Rashad Evans. And UFC has an interesting quandary if he actually gets the championship, because they're going to have to kind of rework their marketing. I don't know. They have to get people fired up about Machida, because the elusive thing, I don't know if it sells yet. But you know what? I'll tell you what. If he wins the next two fights and wins the title, he should be sellable.
Yeah. Well, you certainly bring in the Brazilian crowd.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous fighter. He's beat a lot of top guys to be where he's at, and he's got such an interesting, unique background and style of fighting. I like it. It's intriguing to me as a fan and student of the sport to see him fight.
All right, good deal. Appreciate it. We'll see you out there.